For today's tutorial, we're going to be building this colourful coastal cottage. It's a gorgeous little 2-storey home that looks perfect situated right by the sea. This will only be a tutorial of the shell of the house. The landscaping won't be included as a tutorial, just so it allows you to be creative with your own garden. Just a quick disclaimer, this build includes no CITs or mods, just retexturing of the blocks, flowers and the leaves from a mix of the Mizuno 16 texture pack, Better Leaves and Botanical collection. Let's begin by having a look at the materials needed for the shell of the house. To avoid confusion, I'm going to refer to the two joined together slabs as one brick throughout the video. Let's follow the markings to start off our house and build a wall of 1 block high all around. On the markings where you can see logs, also add glass panes to be 2 blocks high. This will create our windows. Leave the single log space at the front of the house for a door. We'll fill that in shortly. Once you've done your first layer, we're going to visit each wall and ensure that they're 4 blocks high in total. For the window sections, you only need to add 1 more block on top. When you get to the door space, leave the bottom section free and add 2 blocks at the top of that wall. In the middle 2 blocks of the windows at the sides, add another 4 blocks up to give you a total of 8. This will be the highest point of our house. Do this on both sides. The roof design is pretty simple, but I'm going to do minimal explaining to avoid confusing you, so you'll want to follow along visually for this. From here, add an andesite stair block on the back side of that wall and begin to slope it down. When you've filled in the roof so it sits flush with the top of the wall, you can add 1 row of stair blocks to create the roof overhang. Extend each side of the roof out by 1 block as well to create the hang on the sides. Just a little disclaimer, I did have some replay mod issues, so I've had to go in and re-record a small part of this roof, which is why some of the floor and walls are filled in and the environment looks a bit different, so please just ignore that. Follow my block placement here to create a curved roof above the window, using slabs as well as stair blocks. Once that's done, add 1 row of stair blocks along this wall and add 2 additional blocks for the joining extension wall. Now for the extension, we're going to add 4 blocks along the right side of the wall, including the overhang block, and just build up our roof to meet in the middle. The middle consists of 1 down-facing stair block at the front and then slabs the rest of the way back. Make another row of stairs on the rest of the roof. We're now going to merge the main roof and the extension roof together. We're just going to slope down the stair blocks, but watch what I do here as we need to break and replace a couple of blocks. Inside the house, just behind the door, build a wall to be 3 wide and 7 tall with concrete blocks. Add a block in the middle of the 5th row to start creating the window. This is the outside view of the window space. We need to add in some andesite blocks as well, so please follow what I do to merge it with the normal roof. Filling in the rest of the roof is really simple. It's just a case of making sure that your stair blocks all sit nice and flush with the extension and window sections. Even though I'm prompting you to follow along visually, I'm more than happy to assist if you have any questions or issues in the comments. Once the roof is all finished, go around and fill in the rest of the walls and place down-facing stairs on the roof overhangs just to stop it looking so blocky. On the sides of the house, you can add in some windows if you'd like to give the 2nd story more light and just to make the house look a bit more attractive. I haven't done it in these clips, but I do add in 2x2 windows just slightly below the roof later on. Now we're finished with our roof, let's go in and add some leaves. Today's leaf block of choice is acacia, and I'm placing these down freely in a way that kind of mirrors the curves and contours of the roof above the window sections. I just place them down until I feel it looks right. Let's now add some leaves onto each side of the house so each wall has some greenery. I'm adding extra leaves on the roof at the back just to help fill the space. Our climbing leaves are placed down now, so let's start on the landscaping. As I said at the start of the video, the garden won't have a tutorial as I want you to let your creativity flow, but of course you can follow what I do if you're struggling. The landscaping for this is always changing though, so just be warned if you do try to follow along. I also do some bits off camera. In the meantime, I'll give you a few tips on how I create my cottagey garden, but I also have a little garden design series you can watch if you want more inspo. For this type of house, I love to create a slightly windy curved path leading up to the house, and I've placed gravel down here but changed most of that to dirt path blocks later on. Having the path down first allows you to have an idea of what space is available for your other garden areas, like water features, flower beds, seating areas, and so on. Flower beds in a cottage garden are an absolute must, and most of the time I find it beneficial to start digging out a space for my beds. I normally revise these later on and add or decrease them depending on what else I want to add to my garden. The blocks I use for my soil mix are moss blocks and coarse dirt. I always place these randomly so it looks a little messy. If I'm ever lacking on inspiration for my gardens, Pinterest is my best friend. You just do a quick search for English cottage garden and you have so many beautiful results. I definitely recommend having a look on there if you're struggling. I always use leaf blocks as bushes, but if you can, use a different leaf from the ones on the roof and the walls. I do this just to have a visual difference of the climbing shrubs and the ones in the beds, as it's highly unlikely that they'd be the same plant in real life. I'm just using jungle leaves for the flower bed bushes in this build. I usually love to add colour to my gardens to give the impression of a wildflower bed, but for today's one, I'm actually just going to stick with white flowers. I'm using lily of the valley, white daffodils, and oxeye daisies. I'm mixing these in with large and normal ferns and both sizes of grass. I'd actually started digging out that space on the right to extend the flower beds, but thought that a pond would actually fit quite nicely there instead. Sometimes you have an idea of what you want, but your vision changes and you go a completely different path, and that is more than okay. For the pond, I just dug down by a few blocks and added some moss in a few places, then I filled in with water. Later on off camera, I pop in some lily pads and fish. If you decide to add a pond to your build, a good way to help blend it in with the rest of the garden is to extend the flower bed around it to draw it in, just so it sort of hugs the pond. Now we have a rough idea of how we want our garden to look, let's place down some trees. I'm using a mix of birch and oak, which are the two trees from this biome, but I do also like to incorporate spruce to add some depth. Plant the trees all around the build. I forgot to record me adding a door, but I used a birch one to match with the colours of the house, and I also filled the floor and ceiling in with birch blocks too. Let's take a look at our finished house. Going to take a little walk around the side of the cottage first, just to show you the path I placed down, and I also added in some sand blocks in the water to make it feel more beachy. And I've made this very low-key flower bed underneath this window. I just wanted to make it look quite natural, so I've left some of it as just grass blocks. We're going to move around to the front of the house again and take a little look in the garden. Here's our pond with some cod swimming around, and I've used bone meal to create the plants in the pond, and I've just popped some lily pads on top. We've gone really low key again with the flower beds, just using a simple colour scheme to not take the attention off of the house. Over here I've stacked some birch fences up by the door as I really like how that looks. Let's make our way inside. It's actually a pretty big space. I've just popped a ladder in the corner, but that could be moved and changed to stairs. I used slabs instead of blocks for the upstairs floor to give the ground floor a slightly higher ceiling. This area over here in the extension could make a really nice breakfast nook. I might do that if I decorate it. And taking a brief look upstairs, I filled in the walls with the warp slabs to hide the majority of stair blocks, and that actually makes it feel like a proper room instead of just an attic space. Cozy little window seat to read on would fit so nicely here. This just feels like a really good sized bedroom with a lot of potential. I wouldn't mind having my bedroom up here. This concludes our tour and therefore means it's the end of the video, but I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and I would love to know if you built it in your world.